Hey everybody, this is Kevin Kautzman with the podcast Get This. It's a show about things people love, and I'm coming to you from downtown St. Paul, Minnesota. It is Friday, August 7th in the foul year of our Lord 2020, and I'm joined by Brianna da Silva. Brianna, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, and thanks for joining the show. Where are you?
I am in Colorado, so I'm like just north of Denver.
Okay, I don't know why I thought you were in California. Probably because that group that we're working with has a bunch of California people.
Yeah, a lot of people there are from California, but nope, not me. I'm by the mountains.
Okay, right on. I just watched a documentary about the Killdozer incident, which is something I'm somewhat obsessed with. Do you know about this, the Killdozer?
I don't. No.
It's a documentary you could watch. It's on Netflix now. It's called Tread, and this guy, Marvin Heemeyer, sometime in the aughts, I think it was like 2005, had a long-standing feud with the Granby City Council there in Granby, Colorado. And he was a welder, very, very competent welder. So he proceeded to purchase a bulldozer and convert it into a tank.
God.
He welded himself shut and then proceeded to demolish the town.
Wait, what?
Yes, it's a real story. It's called Killdozer. Every year, I think it's in June, a certain corner of the internet, a lot of libertarian types, a lot of anarchist types celebrate Killdozer Day because this was a man who was pushed too far and nobody else got hurt. Only Marv got hurt. But yeah, that's fun. So I guess I spent an hour and a half watching that documentary last night, and there we are. We're back in Colorado. Although I think this is probably going to be a more pleasant,
hopefully,
chat. Yeah, right. You're not. Well, and so are you? Well, I guess this is a show about things people love. So what's the subject you want to talk about today? Yeah.
Language and linguistics. It's something that I find really fascinating, both just because I'm a writer and language is interesting because it's something I'm using all the time. But I'm also more specifically a speculative fiction writer. Oh. So I dabble in a lot of fantasy and science fiction, and I've been working on learning how to build my own, constructed languages since I was a teenager.
Oh,
I think
wow.
I'm getting the hang of it now. My first attempts were pretty bad, but so it's just something that I spend a lot of time on. It's just really fun and really fascinating. So yeah.
Wow. And so, of course, the first thing that pops into my head is Tolkien, right? Everyone
certainly the first inspiration. Everyone's first.
Elvish. Yeah. And maybe also Klingon comes to mind.
Klingon is probably the second most.
All right. And maybe Esperanto too.
Yeah, Esperanto is interesting. I know at least one person that can speak it. I meant to learn it, and I just kind of didn't have the motivation. But it's kind of interesting too.
That's fascinating. Well, that's a lot to unpack. I don't think we're gonna have any trouble talking for an hour about all of that. I'm a writer myself, and I just think words are fascinating. And I was ranting yesterday to my fiance about the state of the world and how it's us against dark wizards who use words to manipulate our brains and to get us to do things we shouldn't do, neurolinguistic programming and all the rest of that. I'm really into that kind of postmodern, sort of hippie, intense way of looking at language. Language is really what crafts the reality that we inhabit. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because part of what I find really fascinating about language is how different it can be and how, there are so many things that we assume. We do this with culture too, where this is something that I'm always trying to be aware of as a world builder, is that we will get used to things that are norms in our own culture or in our own language, and we just assume that they're universal when they're not. And it's always really mind-blowing. And you realize, like, wow, like, for example, there's a language, and I forget where this is. I want to say it might be like an Australian indigenous language, but I could be completely wrong. But there's this language that's documented where you can put the words of a sentence in literally any order and it still makes sense.
Oh yeah. Wow.
Because they're I think it's something like every single word has some sort of like a indication of what part of it is. So you just add, to the beginning or the end of it. And so things like that, you would just assume that, well, I'm sure every language has some specific word order. Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's really telling, I guess, how unaware you are of the world at large and like history at large. If you're building a world and all your made up cultures are basically just like your own culture, but with different colors, different things
right.
on the surface change. And same with language. If you're trying to build a a language and it's basically just structured like your own, but with different sounds. It's pretty clear that, yeah, you haven't really looked at other languages.
Right. Well, and what languages do you speak?
Oh, I'm not really fluent in any other language, though I'm close to that with Spanish. I'm conversational. And then I've just been like dabbling in Norwegian and Japanese, which I'm very beginning. So, but yeah, I have a lot that I want to learn. I'm not fluent though. It's often like a studious thing that when I do, that's something I want to get better at because I really want to be fluent. I've always wanted to. I need to be immersed for Spanish to get to that next level. So
I really regret not taking Spanish. It's a real oversight. It's something I like to remedy. I have German, ein bisschen, and that's kind of fun. I spent a little time in Switzerland, and there was one summer there where I was there, I think for 6 weeks, and then I started dreaming in German, and that's how you know, things are really starting to work. Pretty cool. It's a fun thing to learn a second language. I think it should almost be a requirement, certainly for university.
It's kind of embarrassing how in the United States we're all pretty just monolingual. I was in Norway and this guy there, he asked me what languages I spoke and he immediately said, please don't just say English. I was like, oh God, well, I can speak Spanish, I guess. It's just so funny because like in Europe, you have to speak, in most places in the world, you have to speak more than one language. We don't have to. We can get away with just speaking English because it's the most common language.
It's been such a successful language that we get away with it, right? I've got a buddy who I was talking with him this morning. He's in Berlin. He's just learning German. He doesn't need it. He can go do business over there purely on English. Just wild. Well, so tell me about this Norway connection. That's a little far afield. Do you have family? What's the story there?
It's so random. So basically, it started when I was like 11 or 12. I just became really into history too. I became really fascinated with Old Norse culture and history. At the time, I just understood that as Vikings, but then I realized, no, it's not just about Vikings. It's like one tiny sliver of that history. And then I just kind of have always been interested in Scandinavia. And I learned as an adult that I do have some Scandinavian in me or whatever. So I decided I would go and visit Norway. A couple years ago, I was, I guess I was having a quarter life crisis. So I went and traveled a bunch and that was one of my stops. So I was in Oslo for about like 5 weeks. And then I was like kind of freelancing, just kind of working.
5 weeks in Oslo. Wow.
I feel like I pretty much saw the whole city. And then I went and I went out of the city a couple of times too.
Well, my stepfather's family is Norwegian. We're not, my family, but he's got a lot of interest in it. And what I know about Norway comes from, contemporary Norway comes from the Knausgård novels, the My Struggle novels. Are you familiar with these?
No, I'm not.
Karl Ove Knausgård is a writer. If you're interested in Norway, you should definitely know him. He's the most famous writer in Norway. He wrote 6 novels about his own life, which sounds just totally navel-gazing and impossible, but it's actually incredible. It's riveting. It's about his alcoholic father and him becoming an alcoholic himself and overcoming that and family and Norway and everything. It's just really great. It's worth checking out. Norway seems like it'd be a cool thing to visit. I'd love to see. I've never been there, nor have I been to Sweden, and I'd love to do that. Did you get to Sweden when you were there?
I'm going to pause 1 second and move this microphone. I don't know if you can hear that sound.
Yeah, you're fine. I can't hear anything.
Okay, well that's good. But anyway, this will be a little.
Yeah, that's all right. Cool.
If you can't hear it, then I'll just leave it.
No, you're doing. Yeah, I think we're fine.
Okay. I did not make it to Sweden. I was just in Norway, but I do want to go there at some point. I have my grandma, who's the one that discovered, that there was some Scandinavian in us. She and I have been talking about doing that.
Yeah. Well, when our passports aren't toxic again, I think people will want to travel.
Yes.
I mean, we're radioactive Americans, more than normal right now.
More than normal.
Oh my God. What did you do in Oslo? What was there to do?
Let's see. I mean, I did largely just spend a lot of my time like kind of being a tourist and just seeing the stuff in the city and, working from different coffee shops and stuff like that. It's been 2 years. Let's see. I mean, I don't know. There's like a lot of museums there.
Sure. I bet it's very walkable too. You can just
it's extremely walkable. I think what's most fascinating to me about that city is just I mean, it's so different from any American city I've ever been to, because most people there don't use cars. They
Right.
just, so like the streets are super empty. You will just see like a really expensive, like, electrical car every so often. It's kind of eerie. And then everyone's just on the roads. They're on the sidewalks. I mean, they're either walking or they're biking, or they're taking the public transportation.
Completely different culture because of that.
Yeah, very clean, a very clean city. Just super accessible, super easy to get around. And yeah, everyone there is really healthy and really like fit, and they go hiking in the weekends. And yeah, and I felt not fit being around them. I was like panting while I'm trying to
Really? Huh. I guess that doesn't surprise me. They have that reputation for being kind of outdoorsy and a little, I think they're a little rustic compared to the Swedes, for example. I think the Swedes are known for being a little more urbane, although maybe that's just, what do I know? I've never been there, but.
Yeah, most of Norway's population is in Oslo, if I recall correctly. Yeah.
I wonder how many people live there. Do you happen to know what the population of Oslo is?
I don't remember. But it's not a very big city. I mean, I was almost able to walk across it like in a day. Like
It's under 700,000. So interesting. You learn something. Yeah, you learn something every day. Fun. Well, so now, did you formally study linguistics or philology, or are you? No. And that's fine. Okay. So this is your interest. Yeah,
I've like taken, like, I'll find, basically, if I were to ever go to school again, which I don't think I would, that's probably something I would study, that or some form of either that or history or like classical literature. I don't know, it'd be hard to choose, but yeah. And so those three things are things that I just kind of pursue in my own time. Like I found it's pretty amazing, the free courses that you can find online if you're really interested in something. Like there's so many options. There are universities that will, just kind of hand out one or two free courses and things like that. And
if people only knew, and then as far as auditing goes, I believe most state universities, which include some of the greatest universities in the world, have a policy where if you're a resident, you can audit. You audit a class. You can go and sit in. You're really only limited by your imagination and the professor. You want to talk to the professor in advance. You don't just want to show up. But I think most of them have those policies. You can go in and sit in on classes. Pretty wild.
I did not know that. Now that's very interesting information.
Yeah. I could be mistaken in overgeneralizing, but I know when we were at Texas, I think Texas has that auditing policy because it's a public institution. The tax dollars go to pay for a portion of that. So that's something to think about. This is an era of no excuses. You don't have an excuse. You can make a podcast with Zoom here. It's not, again, you're limited by your imagination, but that's great. Can people find you online? Do you have a website or a place where they can find your writing or anything like that?
Yeah. So I have a website. It's briannadasilva.blog. And that's Da Silva with an A, not an E. And I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. I don't have, my first novel isn't out yet. It will be out next summer. But I have a poetry.
Oh, great. Do you want to talk about that? What is it about?
The novel? So it's a I would say a young adult crossover epic fantasy novel. And in short, it's about a group of teenagers who get caught up in a war and begin to wonder if they're fighting for the wrong side. And so it's I just realized you just switched. Sorry, I got confused for a second.
I found your website.
Yeah. And so, it's about empire and resisting tyranny, I guess, in a nutshell. My blog is kind of all over the place, I would say, honestly. I had the sort of unique experience in that I'm a lesbian, but I grew up in a very conservative background, so I do write about some of that on my blog. But yeah.
Did you say the title of the novel?
Oh no, it is City of Reckoning. I guess I should have mentioned that.
Okay, all right. And how are you getting it published?
It is going to be independently published. Yes, because another thing I love is marketing. I just really want to do it myself.
That's sweet. Well, now in this age, we're limited only by our imaginations. We have the tools right at our fingertips. I was thinking about this earlier today, how fortunate we all are, even in this damnable year that we're living through. We still have the ability to connect like this. And again, earlier today, I was on with someone in Berlin, then I was on with somebody in Massachusetts, and now I'm on with you, and it's seamless. This is something in the 90s when we all had dial-up connections. I remember the first time, I made a video call like this, and it was murky jerky, and the connection was terrible, and you cut out, and yeah, it's something to be grateful for anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I even remember when like Skype was first a thing, or at least in my memory, but first being a thing, it was so bad. You spent 90% of the call being like, "Can you hear me? Can you see me?" Like you might get one sentence in.
Well, I used to use Skype for the podcast, but for whatever reason, Zoom, their sound gate is so much better. It just makes my post-production way easier. And I was able to take the podcast to this video format with it, which, it's pretty fun to do. I really enjoy these conversations. And it's something that, you and I are working on this project together, this Avaz Media project, which I talked about with our last guest. And it's interesting to just set an hour aside to really get to know someone based on one of their passions. So you're talking about world building and building a language and everything. So are you doing that for your novel? Does your novel have its own language and grammar?
So there are, okay, well, I'll get into it. So
I'm really excited. You got a little twinkle in your eye.
Try to, I know it's not often that I get to just nerd out about these things. So basically, the thing with world building is you're always focused on aspects of your world that their story is taking place in. So obviously the aspects of the world where this particular book takes place in are the areas where I've done the most work. And I'll continue to do more work as more stories explore it. But I do have, I would say, so there's various language groups that I've identified that would be in this world. And then I work through like their relationships to each other, kind of the general sense of how they would have shifted over time and stuff like that. And so in this one, there are two. No,
that's all right. Is that you have a hound dog at home?
Yeah.
That's all right.
Second.
Is it yours or is it? Yeah.
It's my sister's. Hey, Addison. Oh, no. Okay. They're taking care of it.
I'm sure it's okay.
So in this book, there are two languages that are prominent, because there are two main cultures that you're interacting with. And so I've been working on those mostly. And the fun thing with that is I'm also because I haven't seen any fantasy authors do this, so I figured it's kind of unique, as I've actually created some, what's the app called? I'm reading what it's called. Let me look it up real quick. Yeah. I created some little it's called Quizlet. Mm-hmm. So I have some actual little lessons and little flashcards that people would be able to use if they wanted to learn one of the languages.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
So
I love that. I love that stuff. That reminds me of when Nine Inch Nails had a video game made for one of their album releases, and it was tied into some real world stuff. I didn't get really deep into it, but I just knew, wow, they're doing some really cool stuff. They were actually hiding things out in the physical world, and it was all about this album release. And it was this meta game. I'm not saying you're going to go that far, but little things like that are
Oh, it's a lot. I was just thinking this is totally relevant. Since you have video, I can show it to anyone who's seeing the video, but I have a tattoo with the script of one of my languages. It's my only tattoo I have so far, but
wow. Okay.
This is what one of them looks like.
Wow. So it has its own alphabet.
Yeah, both of them. So there are two alphabets, and then all the languages in this world use one or the other. So that's one of them. And that one is, so the language that one is created for is one that's very vowel heavy. And so the structure of it was kind of fun because I have a character per consonant. The main curve shape is the vowel, and then you would add something to the top or the bottom for it's for each syllable, not each consonant. Uh-huh. So there's a vowel, and then you would add a consonant to that character, basically. So it creates one character.
So what is that? How do you say that word?
Oh, the word is, I'm sure I remember. Oh, it's Inkeranumi, which is also a made-up word that is basically kind of like the feeling of the Nike logo, basically. But the word that basically means that, yeah.
The word that means the feeling of the Nike logo.
It's literally go stubbornly. That's what it means
Aha.
literally. But that's kind of the semantic meaning is like,
Got it.
okay, even if it's difficult, just do it anyway. And so I
I
created that
like it.
word and I was like, this is fun. I'm going to put it on my body.
That's really powerful. I enjoy that. This is one of the
Hmm.
great things about learning a second language, or I suppose making your own up, is that you're able to conceive of these words that the original language doesn't have. In German, there are some fabulous words, of course, that we use in English. Schadenfreude, the joy that you take at someone else's suffering. Of course, that's a German word, right? I mean, it literally means kind of like shadow joy or secret joy, Schadenfreude, and that's a fun one. I mean, there are lots of examples like that. And if you don't learn that other language, it's like you don't have a word for it, so you can't wrestle control over the mood or the feeling. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I love learning words that don't have translations. I also think it's really cool to make them. There's just something really exciting about that. I don't know. It's like I made something very, like I just birthed something into reality that is a complete abstract concept.
Are you familiar with Grant Morrison's Sigil Magic method?
No, it's not ringing any bells.
I'll send you a link to that offline, but he's a very famous comic book artist. He wrote The Invisibles, and he wrote the Invisibles comic to be a meta sigil. And the whole idea behind this sigil magic practice is that you take a phrase that you want to manifest in the world. So you could say, I would like to have a successful podcast, or I would love to sell 10,000 copies of my book. You do all capital letters. You strike out the duplicate letters. You write out the phrase, strike out the duplicate letters until you're left with a set of letters. You then use the shapes of those letters to create what he calls a witchy symbol. So you create a symbol, a sigil, and then you do something to charge it. So this could be any number of things. The way he recommends is pretty lewd, but you could do it lots of different ways, and then you put it out into the universe, destroy the sigil. And there is a speech that he gave at one of these conferences. Can't remember the name of it. It's the little devil shape. It's like the Disinfo conference, kind of like a hacker conference. And he's a freak for this stuff. And he's like, what's crazy about this stuff is that it actually works. You do it, and it's almost like, he claims, it's almost like you can hack into the root of reality and start to play with the operating system. Anyway, I love that stuff. I'm very nerdy, very cool misfit stuff. So I would argue that's what you're doing to a point. And certainly if you're committed enough to putting a tattoo on your arm, you're going to, yeah.
I know that I did that, I guess, like 2 years ago. And sometimes I'm like, I can't believe I did that. Like, I don't think I'll ever regret it, but it's still like, that is, well, I did that.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
It's very impressive. I want to ask, where did the idea for that word come to mind? Is it from the story, or is it?
No, it was just, I would say, a natural thing I stumbled upon. I'm trying to remember if there was anything else to it. I don't think so, because I just put those two words together and I realized that I could create a new word from them. Like, it's great. It's just random.
Well, so this is an example of, like, you make this sort of sigil-y. Can you see this right now?
I'm seeing Oslo population right now.
Oh, you're seeing Oslo population. Let me change the screen here, and we'll do one of these numbers. Yeah, so this is this goofy kind of, and I think this stuff is so fascinating. The idea that you can manipulate your own mind using these kind of almost self-hypnosis techniques. Yeah, here's Grant Morrison looking like an absolute savage. There he is. Look at this. You program reality. Now do it. I love that. I just love it. Well, now, so how long have you been working on that novel?
Oh boy, 6 years.
Wow.
It's almost done.
And are you at the phase where you're editing it?
I've been at the phase where I'm editing it for a while. I'm in the final stages of editing, I would say. I mean, sort of rewriting the end a little bit as I speak, but yeah.
How long is it?
It's a big chunky novel. It's currently around 250,000.
Wow. And
Yeah.
is it going to be part of a series? It has to be, right? If you're building a whole world, right?
Well, so this is part of a duology, but I have other stories that I'm planning to write in this world.
Now, for the language and the one that's on your arm and all of that, are you using any other? I guess the question I'm asking: are there guides if one wants to begin to do this? Is there a place you go where they help you break it down? Or are there books that you've been reading? How did you even begin to think about doing it?
Yeah, I would say it would probably be better to start with guides. I didn't, and so I stumbled around a lot. There's a book I haven't read yet, but I'm planning to, called The Art of Language Invention. It looks really good. I think, I mean, for me personally, I just kind of, I've just been kind of learning little bits and pieces about how languages work in general, and then getting inspiration from there and making stuff up. But yeah, and I'm trying to remember the name of this author. Wait, actually, I think he's on my bookshelf.
Yeah, grab it. I'm pulling up the. Can you see the living language? Can you see?
Yeah,
this?
I'm thinking there's another one. Yeah, so this guy, I mean, he's like a film. He's one of the people that you would hire, like if you were having like,
right.
a movie or something.
David J. Peterson, language creator, author, artist, and I'm at artoflanguageinvention.com.
Yeah. So that I haven't read this yet, but I think that's you probably spend less time than I did learning how to do it if you started with a book like this. But one of the things that I've been using a little bit as a guide is from Tim Ferriss, I think is the name.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, well, he's this guy that just tries to hack life, I guess you could say. He does.
Sure.
That's him. He does a lot of
a 5-hour work week guy or 4-hour work week.
Yeah, 4-hour work week guy.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Nice. But he also has this technique for learning languages really fast, and I keep meaning to try to do it exactly the way he says. It doesn't really, I don't feel like it fits really with my flow of learning very well. But anyway, he has this list somewhere online of like the 625 most common words that you want to learn when you're first trying to begin conversation language.
Right.
And so I used that. I took that list and I kind of shifted it into more era specific for my world as like a basis for creating just really basic vocabulary that I could work with for one of the languages. I don't know if the other one has as many, but I'm still working on the other one. But yeah.
In terms of your writing process, where does the linguistic construction sit with it? Is it a case where you sit to write the story, maybe you have a little block and so you go work on the language, or is it more discrete? Are you setting time aside? Or explain that to me. It's unusual.
There isn't quite a process there. Well, okay. So it depends. I would say, I mean, I spend a lot of time on these languages just for fun. Like it's really just a thing that I do that does not add any value to the story. It's just enjoyable for me. And that does come up naturally in the story. So I follow the same strategy, I guess, that people would use if you were writing, say you're writing a story in English and it takes place in France. Now, all your characters are speaking English, obviously, because it's an English book. But every so often you sprinkle in a French word if, say, it doesn't translate directly into English, or just to kind of flavor it and make it feel like you're in France. And that's something people do a lot. And so I do the same thing in my fantasy book. Basically, like there'll be a word that I've already created that I feel like the character would say. And I'm like, that doesn't really translate exactly into English. Or just, I feel like that is a natural spot to put this word. Like terms of address, for example, you know, because that's very culture specific. You know, they may not use like sir and ma'am, like those are kind of culture specific. Sure. They have different ways of addressing people. And so I use those. Or, you know, they might have different greetings or things like that. Or just every so often there's some word I'm like, I'm just going to put that in there. And so that creates it definitely makes the culture and the world building feel a little more natural if you're starting with some words you've already just created. But then also I will encounter situations where, for example, in this book, some of the characters travel into an area I haven't done as much work world building with yet. And so I had to very quickly, I realized that it really made sense in the situation to hear words from another language that I hadn't built yet. So I was like, all right, I got to sit down and just make some basics so I can make it, you know, believable. And then I'll come back to that language later and build it out for real. But so I did have to do that.
I'm reminded of Dune as we're talking.
I haven't read that yet. It's very on my list,
you
though.
have Dune in front of you. I would love to reread it. Oh
Mm,
boy, what are your
yeah.
influences? What are your top five? And go more obscure if you can, but if it's mainline, that's cool too.
Ooh, my top 5 influences. I always struggle with this when I'm on the spot, because I feel like I get influenced by so many different things all over the
Hmm.
place.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, if if you could, you had to take a fantasy novel or a speculative fiction novel with you on an island, what's one you would want?
I actually my very favorite speculative fiction series of all time is the Red Rising trilogy by Pierce Brown. It's
I've heard
actually
of
science
this.
fiction.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's so good. It was funny because I have this very, as many writers do, a very specific storytelling taste, and that's what I write. And I always just assumed that that was never something I was going to experience as a reader or a viewer. It's just something that I would create. And then I read Red Rising, and it was literally my exact taste in storytelling. It was an amazing feeling.
Wow.
Would love to have that again someday. I think I'm going to reread them soon, actually. But yeah, those. So I don't know if that counts. Well, I guess it is an influence. I think the way he develops his characters very much influenced me as a writer, because it really, I think, made something click in my head about, okay, this is how you write a character that people care about. And this is how you make people feel like you're in that character's head. So I don't know if I've accomplished that, but I learned a lot from him.
The aesthetic of these books is very cool.
Yeah,
The look, I'm looking at them now. It's really vibrant, and it's got this red, gold, and then this sort of teal. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, I'd love to experience this for the first time again.
Well, you have Dune to look forward to. I don't want to overstate it, but I don't think it can be. I mean, I don't think I can overhype Dune. There's really,
I'm looking forward to it.
Nothing better in the whole of that genre.
And I have to read it before the movie comes out, obviously. So.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, see the David Lynch version too, which is odd but wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah, the David Lynch version of Dune is very strange. It's been many years since I've seen it, and the consensus is that it holds up better than you may remember. But the first time you see it, you kind of scratch your head and go, "What just happened here?" But it's David Lynch, so. But yeah, that's just great. I also am a huge fan of Neuromancer, William Gibson. If you've never read that, that's really worth reading.
The guy that's still on my list.
Yeah,
I was like, have I read it, or is it just on my list? It's still on my list.
The guy invented the term cyberspace. I think he even talks about the Matrix in the book. I mean, it's
I remember
crazy.
what you're talking about. Yeah, that's super influential.
Yeah, there's no limit to this stuff. It's a whole world. I'm really fond of this whole side of things. So what's your writing process look like? Are you writing every day, or are you taking breaks? How's that looking?
I write every day I can. Every day I'm able to scrape aside the time. And I need at least an hour to be effective. 2 is best. If I can decide 2 hours, I just tend to be more effective. Because, it kind of takes some time to like get into the mindset and then get out of the mindset. But yeah, I try to spend some chunks over the weekend too, if I can, if I'm not totally burnt out.
Well, and of course you're doing other things to make ends meet. What keeps you busy beyond writing?
Well, besides working, at the moment, honestly, not that much. I think that's most of my focus at the moment.
That's good.
That, and then just, filling my soul back up with reading and things like that. I also, I'm in Colorado, so I enjoy being in Colorado. So I go on hikes a lot too.
Yeah.
That's
great.
Especially on the weekends. It's a big.
Now I really want to rewatch this David Lynch version of Dune, not to be distracted, but just pull some of the stills out. I mean, it's just so funky looking. Here's Sting. He has a knife fight with Kyle MacLachlan. That's just strange. It's It's a real quirky movie. It's one of the one. I think it was a bomb too. I think it bombed at the box office, and he's one of my very favorite directors. I can't say enough about David Lynch. Just the greatest.
I think everyone's allowed to have one bomb.
He's had such an eclectic career. I'd kill to have an iota of his talent. I mean, he's such a national treasure. Apparently, he also does, I guess, daily or weekly weather reports from where he's living, I think in Idaho. And he's just, I gotta look those up. He's one of those like Bowie or Prince where, God forbid, when he goes, you'll just go, He's a great one, but I hope he's here for a very long time. He's just such a total hero of mine. I was fortunate enough, I got to see, because he's a visual artist first, and he started as a painter. So, and he was in Pennsylvania, he was in Philly. So I had the good fortune to see some of his visual art, and it's totally disturbed.
Oh my
strange. God. Yeah. Well, so tell me, are you sharing your novel with close friends and family? Are you getting feedback from people? How does that look? Do people know what you're doing? Oh, okay.
For sure. I'm on a second round of beta reading feedback, and while friends and family always ask to read, I don't really take their criticism or lack thereof very. It's like their family. You can't really. It's
tough. Yeah, you can't.
People are not only, they may not be your target audience, but they're also biased towards thinking that you're great because they're friends and family. And so
we're having a baby in a couple of weeks, and it could be an ugly baby. I don't think it will be, but family are the people, they're not going to tell you the baby's ugly.
Yeah. So I really value having people that I'm maybe not close to, or people that people that I have encountered online, or we have some connection, but not to the point where, I don't think they're going to be able to hold anything back.
I don't know if such a thing exists as this, but for screenwriting, there's a thing called the blacklist. Are you familiar with that?
That rings a bell, but I don't know what it is.
It's a website where you can go and get coverage for your screenplay anonymously from someone. So people sit and read, and the price is pretty modest. It's I think $60 or $70 for coverage, and they give you a numerical rating. And if you get an 8 or higher, sorry,
I'm just writing this down.
Oh yeah. And if you get an 8 or higher, you get industry highlight. You get an industry highlight, and you get another free review. We've been working a couple screenplays. We've been kind of languishing in like 6s or 7s, but the feedback is really encouraging and generally very sharp. I'm sure something like that exists for novels. Obviously, it's a much bigger chore to read someone's novel than it is to read a screenplay. You can sit and read a screenplay in an hour. But I wonder, there might be something out there for you, like that might be worth looking at.
I'm also learning how to write screenplays too. I'm way more at the beginning of that than I would say with writing novels, but so that will be useful on that end. I'm co-writing like 3 different things in the moment, which is kind of ridiculous because we're not really making progress. But after I'm done with the major edits for my novel, I'm hoping to sit down and work on those screenplays some more. So yeah.
You have a screenwriting partner?
So my brother, actually, he and I are working on one that the story is a collaboration of multiple people in my family. And we have 2 that are
cool.
that nature. And then I have one of my best friends wrote a story that I really want to adapt. And if I can get it made, I will.
Right. So is it a feature or is it a short?
It would be a feature. It's a fantasy story. It's like an urban fantasy story. I like it both because of the story and because it would be easy to do on a low budget. So it would be a really good first fantasy film.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I'm part of a group that meets at the Dramatus Guild, but everything is in Manhattan, but everything is all remote. So if you have stuff to share offline, we can make an introduction. I invited Ryan to that too, and he was going to show, but I think he got his time zones whonked out. But we meet every month, so it's all right. Yeah, I love that stuff. And this is cool because if you're able to have any success with your fantasy novel, this world you're creating, the obvious thing is to take that and adapt it somehow. And obviously there are a lot of fantasy novels that die on the vine and don't go anywhere. And maybe this one won't go anywhere, but maybe it could go to the moon. You don't know. And it's worth just remembering, you got to keep trying and trying and trying and trying, and you're only as good as the next thing you're working on. But that's really exciting. You must be excited. And then if you like marketing too, then you get to have the fun of putting it out there and building your website, and you got a little Twitter following, and see what you can do.
Oh yeah, I'm excited. I'm at the point where, like I said, it's been a 6-year-long project, so I'm kind of tired of working on it. I just want to move to the next stage of market. It's like sometimes when I sit down to work on it, I'm just like, but I want to work on this marketing plan. I want to start making these materials. I'm like, no, I need to make sure this is. I have a professional editor right now who's going through and editing it, and again, the last part of it isn't ready for it yet. So I really need to finish that. Fortunately, she's not in much of a rush, but
that is something that I hadn't really thought about you keep using the phrase world building, and every novelist does this to a degree. You can have realism, which I think doesn't exist anyway, but you can kind of set your novel in the real world, whatever that is. But with this, you get to have the added fun of almost kind of like Dungeons and Dragons. You're the dungeon master for your own universe. That must be quite a feeling. So are you visualizing it? Is it the kind of thing where you lay in bed, or you wake up in the morning and you're having your coffee or whatever you have, and it's passing through your mind's eye? Is it like that? Yeah. I love that.
It never stops. Yeah.
Wow.
I feel like it's like if I'm not working or socializing, I was thinking about this recently. It's like the default place my brain goes to is some aspect of storytelling. Often I'm thinking about this particular world. On the subject of if it doesn't do well, there's always more. I have plenty more speculative fiction IPs that I'm developing too. So,
well, and and again, the root of this idea is that there is a group of young people who are fighting a war and they begin to realize they're on the wrong side.
That's the story. Yes, there is. So the fun thing with this particular world is that I have several stories I want to tell in it, and I want each of them to be a standalone. You could pick up any one of them once they're all written, which will be years from now, but you could pick up any of them and read them on their own. But also, if you happen to read them all, there's a little bit of a subtle overarching narrative too, and it has to do with the history of this world and how people got there. That's all I'll say.
Mm-hmm. Like the Silmarillion for your own world.
This world is on a moon, and so you look up in the sky, and instead of seeing, well, at least at night anyway, or in part of the day, instead of seeing a moon, you see a big old planet with rings. And yeah, so
cool. Well, I wish you nothing but the best with that. That sounds like a lot of fun, and the linguistic thing is really cool. Circling back to Scandinavia, going all the way back, and this is something I wanted to ask earlier, did you see Midsummer?
I just saw that really recently, yeah. It's so weird watching a movie like that after having been to that part of the world, because I'm like, oh God, I can tell you they're definitely far away from civilization right now. Like,
yeah. What did you make of it?
I'm not a typical horror fan, but I thought it was really good. I mean, that was really well done. The acting was phenomenal. The main actress in particular, she just nailed it. I mean, that was astounding.
It's the kind of movie where when it's over, you want to kind of like take a shower and just kind of scrub yourself off and go, oof, yeah, this is something. Yeah, I'm inside the head of something's not right here. We all maybe have these fantasies, but this is dark, dark. It has that power of almost like a crime. Watching it, you feel kind of just complicit in the final decision there and how intense it all is. It's a breakup movie for sure.
You could call it that.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading, it was one of those movies you watch, and at least for me, if I like a film or I like a piece of TV, the first thing I do when it's over, and sometimes even while it's happening, is I'll go, this one I didn't look during, I go on Wikipedia and I start reading reviews, and this I did. And I need to see Hereditary. Have you seen that one? That's from the same director, and he's this young guy. He's younger than I am. He's in his 30s, and he went to one of these elite screenwriting, filmmaking classes. Scorsese defended him, came out and said, this kid's really doing something cool. Which, can you imagine that? You get press from Scorsese. That would be really cool. He's somebody, if you could sit and have a bar with one living American artist, he would be, I think, pretty high on a lot of people's list. Yeah. I have a buddy from the theater who had a really, really bit part in the last Scorsese thing, The Irishman. I'm not throwing any shade here because I totally understand it, but he must have posted 500 times about his bit part in the Irishman, and just talking about how excited he was to be in a Scorsese movie and how it was a dream. And this guy's like an Italian kid from New York City. And then I went to watch the movie, and I didn't see him anywhere. Then I realized, oh, he's like in one shot. But I mean, you can't hold a grudge against anybody. Just the opportunity to be on that set had to be very cool. Well, that's fun. So beyond the writing, beyond the linguistics, you're a designer as well too, right?
Yes, that is what I do to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that happened. I had a mentor when I was in high school who stepped in and stopped me from going to film school. I'm very grateful he did.
Wow.
Um,
Really?
yeah. So basically, I mean, I've known for a very long time I wanted to be a novelist and a filmmaker. Those are my two things I'm really passionate about. Two methods of storytelling that I just enjoy equally. And I got involved when I was about 17. Actually, I was exactly 17. I got involved in an internship with a very small little indie film company close to where I lived. And the guy running it, because I was going to go to film school, and he sat me down with my parents. He was like, don't do that. Like, so many people that go to film school, I mean, basically film school is good if you want to be crew. It's because you learn the skills. Yep. And so he was telling me basically that, if you want to be crew, film school is very good. If you want to be a director, you're not going to learn anything from film school that you can't learn in other ways. He was saying, like you can learn a bunch of the crew stuff even for me if you intern or whatever. And also, like you want to be a good storyteller. That's what a lot of people miss. It's like, oh, you learn how to, use a camera. That doesn't make you good storytellers. He's like, go and study something that will make you a good storyteller, or that will help you in some other way in film. And at the time I was I was kind of a hobbyist graphic designer. I liked playing around with it for fun. And I was like, well, what about graphic design? And he was like, oh, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, that'd work. And that ended up being a very good move for me because I would say, I mean, I graduated, it was about 6 years ago, the same time when I started writing this book. And my film, I feel like my experiences in film are only just now starting to kick up and become more meaningful. But this whole time I've been working doing graphic design. So
there's something to be said about having a means to sustain yourself if you're not a trustafarian while all of this happens. And the thing I always say is Chekhov was a doctor. Chekhov was a country doctor, in addition to changing the short story and plays for all time. So this kind of ludicrous idea that it's all or nothing is a luxury that I think, especially our generation, it's hard to afford. Things are expensive. You have to have a way to feed yourself, to pursue your dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially given that this is a world now where people tend to shift careers a lot too during their life. So it's like the first thing you learn isn't necessarily going to be what you do for your whole life, like what you study in college. Right. So why not just study something that you know is going to help you at the beginning? You can always shift it later. You can always
sure. And it's creative, and some of the principles are similar, and there's a way. Yeah, for sure, without a doubt. I mean, with my own web development business and podcasting and writing, I write plays, all of it. There, you can do a lot. There's you just got to try to manage your time well, and fail quickly and move on to the next thing. And then you may have a hit and you might not even know it because you already be working on the next thing. I think that's one of the fun things about it being a creative person, is that even if you're maybe not in love with the idea you're working on now, all it takes is a moment to have a brand new idea. Do you remember when the concept for this novel struck you?
No. So I was working on the world for a long time, and I had a lot of different stories that I was playing around with that would take place in the world. And then this was one that stuck. And so that's when I started working on it. I think it was a lot of different factors. I think it sort of evolved slowly over time.
Well, Brianna, tell people again where they can find you. It's briannadasilva.com.
Well, briannadasilva.blog.
Blog.
Weird. Yeah. And that's BriannadaSilva. And then you can find me also on Twitter and Instagram. Mostly on Twitter is where I'm active.
Yeah, and I see. Yep, you're on. I call it the stupid bird website.
Yeah, it's very stupid. Yeah.
Twitter is a wild thing. Wild. But yeah, that's great, and thanks for sharing that. And I appreciate you sharing your idea. I would love for you to come back on the show when the novel comes out. We can do another episode and we can talk more about it. I hope it's not too personal to ask. Can I see the tattoo one more time?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool. I think that'll be. We're not going to top somebody who creates their own language and gets a tattoo.
Oh, nice.
It's super cool. Okay, so say the word one more time.
It's Inkeranumi.
Inkeranumi, and what does it mean?
Go stubbornly, but it's just do it.
That's a show title though. Go stubbornly. I like it.
All right.
All right, Brianna, thank you so much for coming on. And this is Kevin Kautzman. This is the podcast Get This. It's a show about things people love. You can find it at getthispodcast.com, anywhere you find your podcast, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, now YouTube as well. And if you're inclined to chuck a buck, give a donation, it's on the website. Support independent media, creators, interviews that you might not hear otherwise. So again, Brianna, thanks for coming on. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. You have a good weekend.
You too.
Later.